Welcome to the Chaos Sector. Let's revisit a previous episode regarding a comment someone made about the private driver. Let's just jump right into it. It explains everything we've reported. Quote, I don't know who gave that interview to the newspaper, but it was not Eric Gower and probably not the private driver that gave those girls a ride home. He may be someone who lived next door to Brian, and maybe he did give his vehicle and name as a tip to LE. Eric Gower does give rides to U of I students, but as a favor to the university, not as a paid driver. I found a copy of his resume on his LinkedIn page, and he has on page 2 that he is a certified driver for the university. I don't know who the guy is in Pullman that gave that interview, but he is not the private driver who gave Maddie and Kaylee a ride home that night. That guy needs to be looked into. Unquote. I also checked that resume, and it says he is a certified driver. Now let's think about this. When it says he's a certified driver for the university, that's more like giving students rides during the daytime, such as driving them to destinations before class, during, or after classes. I don't think Gower is driving drunk students around late at night. It's kind of the wrong environment for him to be associated with, as he has a reputation to uphold with his youth program. Helping youth during the day, and having drunk college students barfing in his back seat at night? Not likely. In addition, how could he fit this time frame in his work schedule? Being an outreach coordinator, he has paperwork to deal with, projects to go over, meetings to schedule or plan. Driving college students around on the weekends would affect his work, trust me. Now during the daytime, where there is more of a likelihood he is active, as far as engaging with students, sure, he could offer rides to students. But not at night, especially the party nights. But let's prove our point even more. You claim the person who gave the interview was not Eric Gower, right? But this was our main point. Sure, we had to dig deeper to find that information, of him being a university chauffeur. But that's not the private driver. See, we are trying to find out who the private driver was. Now get a hold of this. If you agree that the person who claimed to be the private driver is not Eric Gower, yet Moscow PD claimed it was a man named Eric Grower, which is considered a misspelling of Eric Gower, don't you realize this is the person they obtained the information from? It was the private driver who called Moscow PD, after hearing about the identities of the victims that night, remember? It was the private driver who obtained Koberger's license plate and called his vehicle in, remember? This person has not been identified. It is not Eric Gower. The only correction we have to make here is that Eric Gower was a driver for the university. But that is not a rideshare or private driver. Eric Gower was used because of this. Which means, of course, like mentioned, he was framed to be identified as the private driver. Think about it. Why would Eric Gower, or reputable person at the university, want his name revealed in the unredacted affidavit? He would want to remain anonymous. They redacted it after realizing there was a problem. Oh boy, this goes deeper than you can imagine. Moscow PD had discovered Eric Gower was not the private driver after contacting him. Maybe he himself called the police station after word got back to him. He told them he was not the private driver, and guess what they did? They took his name out of the affidavit. Once again, why would you take his name out in the redacted version? Because you wanted to protect his identity? Why didn't you do this in the first place? I'll tell you why, because they found out Gower was not the private driver, and that's just more evidence of a cover-up. Because whoever that person was, they immediately linked them to the murders, but they're covering up those murders, so of course, they have to clear the so-called private driver in the process. Are we on the same page here? Even still, let's keep drilling this home. The poster claims Eric Gower is a driver for the university, yet the person who claimed to be the private driver is not Eric Gower. But in the affidavit, it's technically Eric Gower. So what do you conclude, based on your own comment? Use your critical thinking skills here. Keep in mind, everything the so-called private driver claims, they also told Moscow PD, right? This same Moscow PD identifies the private driver as Eric Gower, right? Now put the pieces together. I'll wait for it. You got it? Okay. The so-called private driver framed Eric Gower, and the private driver himself, who identified as Eric Gower, was used to protect the identity of the actual private driver, which was Emma Bonnie Bailey. That's a lot, isn't it? Of course, this was planned, so they have to operate in this manner. In body cam footage of one of her prior arrests, she was driving some friends back from the bar as the designated driver, but Bonnie herself was intoxicated. She lied to the authorities, claiming she hadn't had anything to drink when stopped. Then admits to having drinks prior. How can an intoxicated Bonnie be the designated driver when she herself was over the limit? Goes to show how reckless she is, and also putting her passengers' lives in danger. But she's very cunning, as throughout that stop, her demeanor was cooperative. One would suggest that Emma is actually just a typical party girl from Moscow. But in those moments of leisure time at the police station, her eyes reveal a very deceptive person. One who cannot be trusted. Bonnie is the type who can talk her way out of situations, or convince others to follow her lead. The pretty girls are usually the ones who can't be trusted, as they use their looks as a weapon. Not all, but enough to come to that analysis. And with that being said, it's likely that Clyde used Bonnie's looks as a way to manipulate many college students, especially the males. Lure them to parties, sucker them out of money, you know the drill. Even convince them to take drugs at parties, as she pretends to flirt with them. Anywho, at the tail end of that arrest, Bonnie is given a phone call in which she tells someone to get $500 out of her safe at home. We assume this is a sibling of hers. Not to say she can't have money saved up, but usually if someone has money in a safe at home, it's drug money. Cash is always the form of payment when dealing with drugs, even though everything has evolved. It guarantees direct payments up front, no waiting, no processing, cold hard cash. Now since we know Bonnie was involved in drug trafficking, and she was also a rideshare driver, which is linked to that drug trafficking, let's also look into her being the DoorDash driver. Yeah, we know, many have come out and so-called debunked that theory. But this would mean these individuals lied, which would actually throw Bonnie under the bus. What would they get out of that? They were telling the truth, my friends.
Hey, isn't this the Jack in the Box where they got, remember the Koberger murders in Moscow?
Yeah.
Xana got Jack in the Box from here.
We had police officers and beds up and like asking for our footage and stuff.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. And it happened, there was a couple, they came in here a few days, not in a row, but there was a few times they were in here asking because I don't really know how they found out or what the evidence was.
Well, because it was the DoorDash got picked up from here. Did you ever find out who the DoorDash driver was?
I don't know the driver personally. I've seen it through. I know I made the dude's food a lot though for the guy. And I remember his name very clearly up on the screen. The guy actually did the murder.
What is it?
It's Brian something. Brian is Brian C. I just don't know the last name clearly, but
Was it Brent Kopaka?
No, it was Brian Koberger or something like that. I think that was his name.
The DoorDash driver?
No, not the DoorDash driver. The person that.
Yeah, the killer's name.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the DoorDash driver. Who was the DoorDash driver?
You know the DoorDash driver that was DoorDashing for the murder?
Yes.
Yeah. You know her name?
I don't know her name.
Dang.
But I was talking to her the other day.
Who was it?
I don't remember her name.
Oh, it's a girl.
But yeah, she has black hair.
Yeah, that's crazy.
When she came in, she said she thought, because I hadn't seen her in a while, she thought they were dashing for a little bit because the FBI was investigating the whole thing. Yeah.
Oh, so she probably had trauma.
Probably a little bit.
Maybe, yeah.
Especially being involved in that.
I mean, it's kind of weird. She ordered it, or she dropped it off like that. Yeah.
So it was a girl.
Yeah.
Oh, I assumed it was a guy this whole time.
It was a girl that dropped off.
Oh, you don't know her name?
I don't.
Oh, and she still drives now again?
Every now and then I see her.
So, do you think Brian Koberger himself was a DoorDash driver at some point?
Maybe, honestly.
I mean, do you remember ever seeing him be a DoorDash driver, around here? Or picking up from here or whatever?
No.
Well, I was just wondering, because I thought it was weird that, the DoorDash person came at the same exact time he did.
Yeah.
To the house. What are the chances of that?
Yeah. I don't know.
Now, that is actual audio of a video some lady had, asking those employees about the Idaho murders. Koberger could have frequented Jack in a Box, as they do have vegan meals. Someone who used to love burgers, and is now vegan, Jack in a Box, among other fast food restaurants, offer vegan burgers for their lifestyle. But one of the males recalls who picked up the order and described a female who matches the description of Bonnie Bailey. Also, he stated that she came back, as he talked to her the other day, and was inquiring about the murders. Listen carefully.
That was DoorDashing for the murder.
Yes.
Yeah. You know,
I don't know what name,
Dang.
but I was talking to her the other day.
Who was it?
I don't remember her name.
Oh, it's a girl.
But yeah, she has like black hair.
That's crazy.
When she came in, she said she thought, because I hadn't seen her in a while, she thought DoorDashing for a little bit because the FBI was investigating the whole thing.
To those employees, she would appear to be someone who had delivered food to one of the victims, and Bonnie may even play the quote, saddened role about those murders. Now, there isn't real concrete leads to suggest that Bonnie was a murderer, but definitely had a part in setting it up. Who knows, she appears very angry, underneath that party girl facade. The same with Dylan, they both have underlying indications of psychopathic or even sociopathic behavior. With this, there is a possibility for them to literally stab someone to death. And knowing Clyde, he wouldn't go down by himself, someone else is going down with him. So if they were a part of the murders, Bonnie would have to participate to prevent her from being, quote, innocent. Which could lead to her snitching on Clyde if pressured. She is the traveling sly fox. But it wasn't a female who was interviewed by Moscow PD, and of course not by the newspaper. It was a male who has not been identified, who is not a private driver, because that would be Bonnie. This is decent work, but we've broken crap like this down plenty of times. Now put all of this together, and ask yourself, why would all of this exist, if Koberger was the killer? Why would Moscow PD take Eric Gower's name out of the affidavit, when they shouldn't have had it there in the first place? It should have been concealed, since you felt it needed to be concealed in the redacted version, right? Bonnie and Clyde are centered around these murders, as it is becoming more evident that drugs were involved. And Moscow PD may also be involved, so we know they won't reveal anything remotely close to drug-related involvement. Speaking of Dylan though, it is speculated that it was Dylan who convinced Kaylee to come back to Moscow. Which means, Kaylee was not physically staying in Moscow at the time. Examining several photos of them together, they seem to have a very odd friendship. It's not that Dylan is quite tall, no that's not it. It's like Dylan doesn't belong in that group. She is the only one not showing her teeth while smiling here. Although it doesn't confirm anything nefarious, it just seems like Dylan is not genuinely happy, altogether to be honest. In most photos shown, Kaylee and Madison are always stuck together, right? But in this photo, Dylan is in between them. Now this would be intentional in my opinion, because Dylan knows they're best friends. I could envision the preparing for the photo, and Dylan just jumps in between Kaylee and Madison, basically ruining their special bond for that photo. So it's like she's trying to pull them apart, right? Like we mentioned in the previous series, Dylan gives off the vibe, and body language, of envy. Now that raises a bit of concern, because if she is trying to split them apart, who knows what motives she had overall, right? Like we mentioned prior, Bethany seems to be the quiet one in the group. The quiet one usually stays out of any and all drama. Now apply this to her accounts of what she knows. Quietly listening, or spotting something, and Dylan knows Bethany is more likely to tell the truth. It's poetic justice, in a very unfortunate way. Dylan tried to split Kaylee and Madison apart, but it is Bethany who will expose the lies of Dylan if she is ever given the chance to testify. Which the prosecution, and let's be honest, also the FBI, is working hard to keep from happening. I suspect it was the FBI who had intimidated Bethany prior, the same way they did the recent DNA expert. Like always, our mistakes only lead to something else being revealed. I guess we should make more mistakes. This is the Chaos Sector.